So welcome everybody. Tonight's lineup. Tonight, well, we have one speaker tonight. After our crowdsourced news session, we have Adam Reynolds and we're talking campaigning. And this week and next week, we're going to run sessions which are kind of based on campaigning. We thought this was probably quite a good time. People are starting to think about campaigning in the run up to the elections in May. And so tonight, Adam's going to talk about online tools that you can use for campaigning. But before we move over to Adam, we'll have our usual 10-15 minutes just to share any local or national news. So if anybody has anything that they'd like to share, please put your hand up. Simon.
I don't think Ailey or Claire is on the call, or Mariam or any of the other women from the LCC Women's Freedom Ride. If they are, I'll put my hand down and go quiet because I'm a bloke. But given that they haven't yelled at me so far, I'm just going to say how incredibly proud we all are of the Women's Freedom Ride on the weekend. Over 1,000 people, women and their allies, riding through central London. It was brilliant, basically, and yeah, loads and loads of really good photos and videos all over social media. Lots of learnings about how to deal with the police who are dealing with the change in the guard at the same time as dealing with a massive ride through central London. Apologies for anyone for that who turned up and experienced some quite at times disconcerting conditions, also for the weather, which was freezingly insanely cold. And a final snidey point on my part, which is let's not talk about helmets and high vis for women riding in central London. Many of the women who did ride had ridden miles and miles and miles and miles to get there. Many of them weren't confident. That we had a lot of people from Cycle Sisters, Joyriders, and LBK Lundra's Bisikletti Klubu, which is a Turkish community in the north of London, riders. These folks, they wear helmets, they wear high vis because they're terrified of London roads. So let's not tone police them, please. And thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I saw the pictures and they were really amazing. I'm glad it went well. And it didn't rain by the looks of it, so that's good. Ian, you got your hand up.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, hi. Not such good news from Bristol. I don't know whether people have seen this week. We've had some little local difficulties on a quite important active travel path corridor that runs to the north of Bristol called the Concord Way. And there's actually two scenarios on it, or situations on it. One that's been going on for 2 years in an area out near Filton called Loch Lees, where Legal and General are doing a building site and have closed the path under a TTRO order. We understood for 6 months. We're now nearly 2 years later. And I'd be interested in any input from anybody about how to respond to the failed renewal of TTROs and lapses of TTROs. So that's one. And the second one actually occurred as of yesterday on an area called Ashley Down. And this one's concerning to us because in this case, where the council are requiring people, instead of following an active travel traffic-free path, to go on to quite a busy major road in Bristol. And the issue there for us is that the diversion it's just not comparable to the alternative, and there's no provision on that road whatsoever. So I guess there's another question there about, has anyone got any guidance on whether LTN 120 rules apply to a temporary diversion? Now, this is a 12-month diversion, and it's put in 1,000 cycle journeys a day onto a road with 20,000 vehicles a day with no provision. And the council said to us, well, cyclists could get off and walk on the pavement, couldn't they? And this is a commuter route in North Bristol. So yeah, it's not a good situation. We've been trying to kick up locally, but any advice from anyone on the call would be really appreciated. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
That doesn't sound good. Unfortunately, I don't think there is any sort of comeback with using LTM 120 at this stage, but it is no doubt something that should be looked at. Does anybody want to come in? Anybody have any ideas on that? If you don't, maybe have a think and you know, put something in the chat if something comes to mind. Did I see, Roxanne, you had some news to share? Please share your news.
Yes. Well, thought perhaps someone else from Cambridge might take the moment. But today we had our County Council Highways and Transport Committee approved the TRO to install a modal filter on Mill Road. So those who are not familiar with Cambridge, this is, I'm seeing some waves. This has been I think in question for nearly 49 years. I think Martin has said the question of what do we do about Mill Road, and seems we finally got to a resolution, but it's been particularly heated in the last few years. CamCycle's been right in the middle of that. So to have the TRO finally signed off, so this summer there shall be a modal filter on the Mill Road Bridge, which allows buses, blue badges, taxis, cycling, walking, wheeling, etc., but not the private motor vehicle. It's one of a really unique high street, really possibly one of the top high streets for independent stores in the UK. So really a big moment for us, but I think I'm still just recovering from the meeting. So I'll say if Martin wants to pop in with any updates, no, we're very, very happy.
I'm recovering too.
Yeah, it's the first time I've had to be evacuated from a meeting for my safety. So I laugh, but here we are. Anyway, so I do hope come this summer you'll come visit us in Cambridge on Mill Road and see how fabulous this amazing street is when we can enjoy the sunshine and our independent shops. I'll stop rambling, but yeah, very happy, but a bit exhausted.
Yeah, that's great news. We similarly have, well, it's an experimental traffic order, but we've 5 filters, modal filters have gone in not too far away from where I live, very close to the city centre. And it's just, it's so amazing when after being talked about for so long, when it finally happens. Some of them are just cones at the minute, but over the course of the week, we'll get the bollards. Bob, you have a hand up.
Yeah. It's not actually for me, it's that I did hear that an LTN didn't go in Brighton, and that it was due to go in but didn't, and it would be nice if somebody was here from Brighton.
I don't know if we have anybody from Brighton.
No.
Can't see anybody.
Right.
Yeah, I'm from Brighton, but I don't know what one you're talking about, Bob.
Oh, right. Well, it's I may have got confused about it. If you don't know, then that's it. Oh, Simon says he can.
Go for it, Simon.
Yeah, Katie's sitting on just opposite me, sitting on a different call, so she says her apologies, but essentially this is some party politics playing out in Brighton, whereby the Labour Party, Brighton and Hove Labour Party, voted recently to redirect funds that were due to go to an LTN, and possibly from the sound of it to the boundary roads on an LTN have now been diverted to public loos. There is a massive and furious war of words going on between Brighton Greens, or Brighton and Hove Greens, and Brighton and Hove Labour Party, of which I can't really comment too much because I have to be studiously apolitical on this kind of stuff. But what I would say is it does look to me on this basis that this is at least the second time that Brighton and Hove Labour Party in close to a local election have suddenly switched their position, and not in a good way. So go look it up, basically.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's true. That's right.
Okay. Oh, well, something to follow in Brighton there. Andy from Leicester, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a bit of bad news to share with people. May or may not be news to some people, but the bike share scheme in Leicester went into liquidation a fortnight ago, and last week we were out removing the bikes on the Stunt Street on behalf of the liquidator. The bike scheme, we'll be able to say more about it going forward, but effectively it's been running for 2 years. It peaked at around 400 e-bikes on street about 8 months ago, six to 8 months ago. And the City Council representative, Adam Clark's gone on record saying it's an example of not a failure of the scheme in principle or the demand, which was increasing, and operationally it was being ironed out, but it was a failure of the market and the private suppliers around kind of cash flow issues. So
That is a
bad
shame.
news to share, unfortunately.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Adam, you got something to say?
Yeah, there's more that I don't know if people have seen. I'm going to post it in the chat. Peterborough have changed the way that they allow cycle schemes to be, or that's going forward from their climate emergency committee. Basically, you don't need to get public approval for changes if it's to do with cycle schemes. I think where we're moving towards is, I think this is about much more to do with things like, you know, if you're going to resurface a road, we don't have a public consultation to see whether or not you want to resurface a road, you just get on and do it. So in other words, so if a road is below standard for walking and cycling, then bringing it up to a standard shouldn't need public approval to do that. But I thought it was quite an interesting step change, I think, for a council to be doing that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you still have to fulfill your statutory consultation duties. So yeah, it's interesting. Adam.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, a little bit of good news locally. In the centre of Chichester, towards the end of this month, West Sussex County Council are actually going to start building, well, in theory, a Dutch-style roundabout. It won't be quite as good as the Dutch would build it, but it will have cyclists going around the outside of the roundabout, having right of way over the motorised traffic. That's on the 286 roundabout at the end of Westgate, and it should be finished by the end of the year. The residents don't know anything about this happening yet, even though the council have given themselves planning permission, so I'm sure there'll be a whole wodge of complaints about it, but it'd be interesting to see how it actually works in practice.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Thank you. Alex.
Hi, yeah, sorry, just a very, very quick one. A little bit of good news from Lewisham. So Lewisham Council, full council meeting on Wednesday night, approved their new budget. And one of the asks that Lewisham cyclists put forward through the London Cycling Campaign's Climate Safe Streets campaign last year was to set up an active travel fund, because Lewisham kind of lags behind a lot of other South East London boroughs in terms of what it's managed to deliver since the pandemic. And one of the things that has changed is the lack of funding for actually an officer to actually just do basic things like keep a catalogue of projects together, so when funding is available to then be able to apply for it. So Lewisham Cyclists actually asked the council to create an active travel fund within its existing budget, so that S106 funding, community infrastructure levy funding and so forth could then be funneled when required towards walking and cycling schemes. They've now agreed that at full council as of Wednesday. So bit of good news. Hopefully it will mean that the council actually have some resource rather than no resource to apply for funding.
Great, that does sound like good news. Thank you. Robin.
Hi, yes, a bit more news from Oxford, trying to work out what's this week and what's a few weeks old. So probably the big news is that Network Rail have given us a plan at last for the works on the railway bridge on Botley Road, which will start on the 11th of April and run till October while they do all the utilities, and then again from March till October next year while they sort the road out, which enables the new station works and what they're putting new tracks and basically rebuilding the station. So the main point of that is that the council can't implement the strategic traffic filter scheme until all of this is finished in about October 2024. So there's going to be about a year's delay from what we'd hoped on this on our great traffic filter scheme, and who knows what shenanigans will go on between now and then. Of course, that places it about 6 months before local elections. Fun. And then the other one is we've just had a consultation on released, which is quite a small one, but could be interesting, on the Cowley LTNs, which are the ones that were put in place during the lockdowns, on changing some of the bollards to ANPR, but one of the larger of the residential roads through there, the most in demand ones, would be which is currently bollard, well, I say currently bollarded off, currently meant to be, although the bollard is one of the most frequently ripped out, will be opened up for buses, which is good, taxis, which is a bit iffy. So there we are. We're working out our responses.
Thanks, Robin. And if we don't have any more news to share, I don't think we have, we'll move on to the main section tonight. And as I mentioned at the top, we have Adam Reynolds from Walk Ride Bath, who's going to talk to us about online campaigning tools. And I'm really looking forward to this because we use kind of a few different things, but I have to say we're not massively adventurous. And I think it's really interesting to see what else other things we could be doing and what else people are doing out there. So over to you, Adam.
Right. I'm assuming you see my screen, so I'll carry on. This one, I got into campaigning and sort of involved with this advocacy in probably around about December 2013. While working for a sex toy company. I don't know if that's related, but anyway. The first thing I think we need to kind of discuss when we're talking about campaigning tools and what you're trying to achieve is understanding who your audience are. So you usually have yourself in the middle or your group in the middle. Surrounded by that is you basically have the public, the politicians and the officers. Some of those are your supporters, and some of them they absolutely hate you to a point where it's quite uncomfortable. I mean, recently I got accused of enabling paedophiles because I wanted to create safe routes to schools. So it's that sort of level of it can get quite nasty, but I hope yours isn't as bad as it is around Bath at the moment. However, I did this slide sort of a long time ago, which was kind of trying to understand what the impact is in terms of a council when a new council comes in, what the impact is on, say, a new cabinet member for transport coming in, how they get up to speed, how you sort of engage with them, how long it takes for them to kind of get up to speed, when they start getting work done. And usually within a 2-year period, there's usually a cabinet change. So there's a new cabinet member for transport. And as we're now happening, which is basically around May this year, there'll be a new cabinet for member of transport. In the same times that cabinet council budgets are usually allocated on a yearly basis. You try and get SIFs done and sorted before the next election or next financial year comes along. And on top of that, you then have your officers who also have much longer agendas. Now, those usually align with trying to work with the cabinet member for transport, but that could also be a complete change every 2 years, depending on who comes in. And then you kind of get to that sort of wrapping things up just before an election, before the next party or administration comes in, which makes you have a completely different transport sort of approach. What that kind of means that is for campaigners, you end up into this sort of, you've probably seen this one before, where you kind of say, try and get things done, get the press about things not getting done, wait for the next member of cabinet, hopefully they're a good one. That sort of thing as it kind of goes on. Where we kind of gets even worse is that, each new sort of election cycle, lots of people want to throw things out and start again, or have another consultation because they really want to push a decision down the line and they don't really want to make any hard decisions. And all this sort of, you're trying to work within that space and trying to keep that going. So for me, a lot of the stuff that we're looking at is how do we leverage the tools that are out there to basically facilitate your campaign moving forward during the election cycles, supporting officers and ensuring that they, a lot of the officers used to have or still do have funding cycles, which are basically an allocation. That's it for 1 year, no more. And so a lot of times you're carrying these projects in your head or electronically. Hopefully somewhere down the line somebody will take it on with you. And also then you have the public and sort of the engagement there. So for us, when we look at the kind of the government tools that are providing at the moment, we know about LTM 120. We know about the gear change sort of commitment in there. We also recently, the active travel capability and ambition self-assessments that the highways authorities have got to do. And also the government has published things like the local authority toolkit. We're aware of the Active Travel Fund and the rules around that, and also that sort of information. And so we understand how how to push those levers and ensuring that these things are delivered to a high standard. We've also recently, which has quite taken some time, but it's there now, we've got the Census 2021 data that's out there. It's sort of interesting. The problem can be is if I want to discuss something about Bath and North East Somerset, I can do. If I want to discuss something about Bath, I can't, because it doesn't have that sort of output area. So it's basically very high level areas. However, the ONS have also produced this really phenomenal tool, which allows you to you can literally draw a shape on a map, and it will try and grab sensible sorts of shapes it can, and you can actually go down to ward level, so you can actually start having conversations with individual ward councillors about what they think they're doing, why they're doing it, and have they considered that a third of their households don't even own a car, and why are you pushing this sort of car first agenda? So this sort of profiling that the census team have done is really phenomenal and really useful. On top of that, we know previously that we've had the PCT.bike tool, which some people may or may not be aware of. The critical thing about the PCT.bike or propensity to cycle tool is that it has within it two type of trips purpose. It has one which is commuting, and it has another one which is school. But the one that's really critical for me is the fact that it allows you to imply different scenarios. So a lot of the sort of design and schemes about demand are done on the basis of, people look at what's happening at the moment. How many cyclists are there on the roads? Why are we bothering to put a cycle lane in? Because we've only got, where's the cycle? Where are these cyclists that need this? Yeah, whereas the scenarios allow you to kind of create that argument. They're saying, look, in 10 years' time, it's assuming, e-bikes become popular and the infrastructure gets much better, you're going to get much more demand. And this is what the modelling shows. And this is government-funded modelling that's available for you to use. We also have, and I call these sort of government tools, but they're actually really, they're just phenomenal external suppliers of services. What do they know? If you don't use this as a way of engaging, and I think Simon Monk has said it before, the responses you're getting back from your FOI requests, they're legally checked for accuracy. Those are recorded pieces of information, and this site keeps track of them and allows other individuals to search for answers, so that you're not asking the same question, and it's phenomenal. The other one, which I think is quite useful in a really odd way, is Fix My Street. And the reason why Fix My Street is quite interesting is most councils now have some contract or system in place which actually feeds these types of reports directly into the council maintenance systems. Now, critically, you also have an ability to historically look at these sorts of issues, and you can see ones which have been marked or resolved, oh, this pothole's been raised before, and it gives you that sort of historical context to look at the physical world where people have reported issues and then they haven't been fixed properly. So it gives you another channel to kind of go back to the council or to your ward councillor and say, look, this is just not being done. This is happening again and again. And then one of the things that I've spent a lot of time on is kind of visualizing a lot of the stuff that we're trying to work with. So this cycle network map that we did a long time ago, and I actually started off as an idea in a hackathon, inspired by the Bristol Cycle Campaigns network map that they had. We basically developed this idea, and I need to revisit this using the new LTN 120 sort of guidelines with the colouring they have. To basically identify the really how bad or good or how whether or not routes between different community areas of a city were actually viable or to certain standards. We've also used it to design up the Living Heart. This again for Bath, which was kind of inspired by the Bristol Living Heart, and basically creates kind of what we call livable neighbourhoods in the city centre. And then the other thing you can do with the exciting things like Google Draw is you can basically start overlaying images and giving them an opacity of say 65%, and you can start kind of blending images together to get very stronger sort of a highlight. So when we were trying to look at hangar analysis, we were looking at things like, you know, apartments, high levels of apartments, high levels of renting, and also looking at deprivation areas to see whether or not there was anything that could be focused on that. And then the final map, you can basically see that the city centre, and going along sort of towards the corridor east to west of the city centre, yeah, there was high opportunities for sort of hangars. You can also, again, doing inside Google Draw, grabbing images, screenshotting them, taking pictures, putting together arguments for certain things. You know, they're very simple things to do, but humans need to see these things because they can't normally visualize them very well. And these types of very simplistic sort of takes 5 minutes to do sort of things help, as well as doing, you know, the more complicated infographics at the end, you know, which was looking at the Bristol sort of 20 mile per hour, 30 mile per hour studies and seeing what the impact is and why, you know, when people talk about 20 mile per hour versus 30 mile per hour, it only drops the speed by about 3 or 4 miles, how that is a critical difference in sort of the kind of magnitude of danger from death. We've also used it to kind of come up with some more sort of complex sort of pushing for this. This started off as the Locksborough Greenway. It is now the Bath to Bristol Railway Path Bath extension. And this is now happening. Up until at least the Locksborough Bridge, with the rest of this is already being sort of already defined and developed with private developers. This whole sort of route is likely to be happening in the next couple of years, and we'll see like the Bristol Bath railway path being extended into Bath, and that's a concept that we came up with, took to the council, and sort of ran with. For other people, other things, you know, street mix is very good. I don't know if anybody's got a laser measuring device. You know, running across the road with a tape measure, trying to get the distance is really, really dangerous. Don't recommend it. However, a laser measuring device, you know, costs 10 quid from Lidl or Aldi or whatever. Yeah, absolutely perfect for getting the spot distance and then actually designing street profiles. Again, visualizing stuff, showing what's possible, having those discussions with people and saying, well, why can't we do this? You've got the space. Now, and then, of course, one of the things that I'm doing right now, which is presenting ideas. You know, you do have to talk at the council. You do have to go to meetings. You know, you may find you're in a meeting with the public and you're wanting to present, you know, so having that sort of practice and learning how to do stuff. So one of the things that we came up with was it was a concept slide deck that I came up for an idea called Scholars Way in 2015. We presented it to the cycle forum that the council ran at the time. The Scholars Way in 2022 is one of the funded projects in the WECA Sustainable Transport Settlement. I've got 10 minutes into this, so I better run quickly. Right. When it comes to working together, it can be quite complicated. By default, most people have WhatsApp on their phone. However, WhatsApp works for very small groups, so about 3, 4, 5 people, very focused, know their topics. You can't do reply and thread. Telegram allows you to do that. Email can be a bit messy and disconnected. You can use email lists. Discord, I find, is better because it does have this kind of channels and subjects. Microsoft Teams, I don't really like. Zoom, as we're using now, is great for sort of when you pay for it, but when you're having a big group, being limited to 45 minutes doesn't really work. You might as well get down to a cafe or an inclusive space where you can all sit there and talk about it. Slack can work as well, but the problem with it is that a lot of these need energy. So if you don't have a very active community, these things can die. So we ended up sometimes using Slack and going forward with Slack, but eventually we're dialing it back down to WhatsApp because we're finding the energy use, the number of people involved in what we're doing, you know, discussion levels, you know, you get that group of 4 or 5 people together really pushing it, it's great. And then what we don't use and what we learned is you don't use Facebook ever as a way of kind of discussing things. It's a very public space. People come in, pretend to be supporters, take screenshots and then use stuff. Yeah, this actually used, I remember making a comment about the Walthamstow coffin, and it was then misconstrued as a potential death threat because somebody didn't understand took it out of context, took a screenshot and shared it with a particular councillor. So it was a mess. In terms of sort of communicating things around blogging, really useful, puts a very thoughtful way of kind of writing out your steps, what you're after. For us, WordPress works really well. Other people have used Wix and Blogger. I particularly like WordPress because lots of other people use WordPress. And reblogging is something, where you quote somebody else's article, make a comment on it, and it appears and gets sent out to all your subscribers to the site. Really useful. Instagram, the socials, TikTok and Facebook, they really should be treated as like a one-way sort of feed system. You shouldn't be using it as a way of engaging with people very well. I don't think it works. LinkedIn, Twitter, and now Mastodon. For me, those are very much LinkedIn. Twitter, to me, again, sort of sits in that sort of weirdly in that Instagram, Facebooky space. It can be quite confrontational, particularly if you see my Twitter account. Apologies for that. But things like LinkedIn and Mastodon are very much more focused on the kind of the sort of people in the same sort of domain expertise. It's not really aimed at sort of that public engagement. One, I think, just to come back to again, fixing issues together. Again, I'm going to re-mention Fix My Street because I think it is a good way of kind of, tracking what issues are going on. But I also like Cyclescape as well. However, Cyclescape is a bit like Slack and all the others. If you're not doing the sort of campaign and there's no energy behind it, and you've got a big groundswell of a community there, it sort of dies off very, very quickly. So it works if there is a lot of push to get people sort of engaged in it, and it's very much aimed at that cycling campaigning sort of space and fixing concepts and ideas and root issues and people sort of raising those. I'm going to carry on being very quick because I'm already 15 minutes in. We have, when it comes to maps, it is all about maps for me. I really enjoy the kind of spatial analysis stuff, working out travel time and stuff like that. I find this particularly useful if you're buying a house or going to go rent a house somewhere. This app.travel time allows you to make those sort of decisions about where you want to travel or where you want to live very, very nicely. I also recommend it, if you're trying to make an argument saying, well, look, 30 minutes gets you this far in this city. What's your problem doing without using a car, that sort of stuff. Also, time travel, which is something you can do in Google Maps Street View. This was me one lunchtime. I found the Google truck car running down in August 2018, and I chased after it for a good half an hour, half a mile, and then died. That aside, but it allows me to kind of scroll back through time. I can see the Street View going back probably to about 2009, which is when Google Street View started. So it can be very useful for investigative work. On top of that, we have other ones like Cycle Streets, which is very good for route planning, and also because it does the choices of, do you want the most direct route? Do you want a quiet route? OpenStreetMap with its various layers is really, really useful. It's actually better for working out like footways and paths and things that people are doing that you don't really see in Google Maps. And then the other one, which is a weird one, is Bing Maps has this bird's eye view, and they've basically certain areas of, mainly around urban areas, they've taken a photograph of every building from every side with a plane, and you can basically effectively rotate round a whole site. So if you're looking at a place and it's got a tree line issue, you're trying to see where a path is, it gives you the ability to kind of rotate round it and see it. So there are little tricks you can use from some of those. When it comes to Google Maps and sort of creating sort of maps of your own, you can their My Map stuff. I've used it as a way of importing in some of the sort of geospatial information that the council provides, and then using my own sort of like ideas, come up with a kind of completely city designed around low traffic neighborhoods. But for me, I find this less intuitive. We've even used it as a kind of group idea to kind of create like identify accessibility issues across the city. However, the one that we've recently discovered is one called felt.com. It's really natural. It's really lovely. It's free at the moment. I don't know how long it'll be free, but at the moment it's free. And you can do some really interesting stuff. So this is our work to identify all of the sort of livable neighborhoods or basically cul-de-sacs or roads where there's no through traffic. And we came up with about 500 in Bath alone. This one here is our sort of sneak preview. This one we don't really share, which basically identifies all the various routes that we're sort of working on and thinking about, and how we can sort of get these off and where we think they are, that sort of stuff. And then the other one I like as well is the National Library of Scotland has this kind of map system. The map system allows you to kind of deep dive historical maps, so we can go look at an area from the 18th century and see it evolve as a place further. And we've used that as a way of saying, well, how long has this been effectively a low traffic neighborhood? And you can go back to say the 1950s, and you can see it still being like a 5-way junction, and by the 1960s you can see it's really closed off and it's no longer the case. So it's a very good, interesting way of kind of doing that historical research on an area. When it comes to, right, we're now at 18 minutes, I'll try and wrap this up, apologies. Trello is a really good way of tracking stuff for us if we have issues. The columns, you define what the columns are. The cards, you create them. You can have conversations about a card. You can drag and drop the cards between different statuses, effectively, which the columns are. It's really sort of a phenomenal way of sort of tracking lots of issues historically that are going on. You can also use Google Sheets. We've done that sort of before, where we use like the cycle forum, tracking various issues that have been raised, and then sort of try to work on them behind the scenes. I've also used it to kind of publish stuff around ATF allocation analysis, that sort of stuff, which I've shared before. Finally, of course, there's this place. This is an amazing place to come. Definitely worth coming online every week. And I feel really privileged to be talking here tonight. And then Saskia kind of pointed out to me that one of the things we should be very aware of is that some of these kind of online spaces, particularly like aren't, I don't think they're very conducive to working together. Sometimes they can be quite hard to engage with. They can be quite hostile. And so, you know, getting out there, being there, and creating those sort of inclusive sort of environments, and being part of that community and feeling like you're empowered by the people around you. It's a huge part of what we are doing here. So, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Wow, Adam, thank you. That was brilliant. And what a good note to end on. Do you want to stop sharing your slides and then we can open it up to questions? Yeah, I mean, I think probably lots of questions, and maybe I can see already in the chat there's a few people who have got questions about actual tools, but I'm going to start with a question from Simon, which I think is a good one, and because you started off very much at the beginning about that kind of technical case making, and then you've moved on through using online tools for kind of social means and also, you know, the kind of the whole range. And I'm sure other people will have contributions to make, and it would be good, I think, to hear about how people do use some of these tools. But Simon's question was, have you looked at the LCC pathway approach, where he says we've moved away from the kind of technical case making for councillors as a priority towards relationship management and emotional persuasion recently, and what do you feel about the balance of the two?
I actually think it is about creating those building those bridges, about allowing it's a very difficult thing, because of the way that the council was working. You would find they drop projects and they wouldn't pick them up again. It's like there's a bridge that got we know that they were the recommendation was, it's called Fielding's Bridge. It sits on one side of the river to the other. It's a footbridge, yeah. But there's about 2 people that know now, and that I'm one of them, and Frank I think is probably on here as well. He's the other one that knows there's a massive copper cable going through that bridge which powers one side of Bath to the other, yeah. But so when they casually say, oh, we're just going to replace the bridge, we can kind of say, hey, hang on a minute, you know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago when you refurbished this. So we know these projects exist, but they get dropped and forgotten about. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing here is almost being like a technical archive of knowledge from that. I think the difficulty is, and I don't know, I haven't looked at this pathway thing, but I think also that the funding streams inside outside of London haven't been so focused, and I think things like TfL have really helped London kind of push ahead with a lot of this stuff and effectively say, yes, boroughs, we're going to ignore you. These are our roads. We're going to get on with what we want. And there have been some shining stars like Waltham Forest to come along into that. And I think you're right, though. You do need that sort of engagement that we have. And I recently, you know, burnt those bridges with the recent the current administration and kind of walked away from it all. Guy Hodgson, the new sort of chair of Water Bath, is phenomenal. You know, really gets on well with everybody and is engaging in a much better way. And that's, but you're right. You need that kind of emotional buy-in, but also from an officer point of view, a lot of time what we're doing is we're kind of keeping these projects alive and keeping them a way forward. Yeah, and I don't know if the LC whip now replaces what a lot of that work what we've done, but at the moment, because our current one is really poor, so I don't think I've given Simon an answer there. Other than yes.
I think that's really interesting. I think I'd like to hear what Simon has to say in response to that. I guess in some ways you're talking, I think because you sort of covered briefly things like blogs and, many campaigns have websites, and that telling the story is so important, isn't it? That that's where you can keep pointing back, look, you said this, and look, you did this. And but yeah, Simon, do you want to come back on that and what you sort of, was that kind of what you were meaning?
But kind of, yeah. I mean, I think so I've put a link for the pathways thing in, but Adam, have a look at it by all means. And anyone else in the UK use it basically. We think it's got real power to it. And I think that was the thing, is that I think all this stuff, the case making stuff, is really vital, and actually painting the picture that I think Adam said several times, and he's absolutely right. I think painting that picture is really vital. But I think we got to a point where we were recognizing that actually a lot of this is not rational. Like there is a moment of irrationality, or there is an element of irrationality to the decisions being made politically in various boroughs in London, by different kind of councillors, and I think that does echo across other places. So the case making stuff is really important and really vital. I think Adam, like, kudos for that brain dump of its incredible proportions, but I think it's also really important to understand that all of that case making stuff has to also fit within a kind of a rubric of emotional kind of, I don't know, alignment with councillors.
Our local superstar for that, I think, is she on this talk? Is Saskia? She may or may not be here. Her setup of Kidical Mass, that is phenomenal. To see that, I mean, in the middle of the winter, it was snowing, and they still had 90 odd people turn up, kids, and it is a beautiful thing to watch. That's, I mean, and I think it brings that sort of human, that emotion to it, that kind of, that when there's somebody like me going at it with all technical data, it's very cold, it's very clear, it's very evidence-based, it's the stuff that DfT want to see, but actually that's not what's gonna cut it in a council meeting. There's 50, 100 kids out there on bikes or riding through the city centre, being protected by others. Yeah, suddenly that's a very different story, and it is about storytelling. It's about mental framing. It's about changing the way people think about this stuff. And for us recently, I mean, a lot of the conversations we have when somebody says, "Oh yeah, there's are these cycle lanes? Why are you putting in these in? These cyclists don't use them anyway." So it's not for cyclists. It's for people that are too afraid to cycle at the moment. It's for the kids. It's about enabling the parent to let their kid cycle to school on their own. It's about making that parent feel that what's there, they can see their child cycling to school on their own. Their 10-year-old daughter going off with their friends and cycling, that sort of walking or scooting or wheeling, whatever it is. And that sort of message is really, really, really important. And there are people that are much better at that than me. Yeah. I do.
Group working in a group is such a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to take a question from Alex, and then I think I can spot one more in the chat. But if other people have any other questions, please put your hands up. It's
more a comment than a question, but just I think the points that, firstly, Adam, thank you for that amazing kind of summary of all that information. It's really, even as someone who's familiar with some of that stuff, it's helpful to have a refresher on it. I think the point I probably just make in addition to what Simon said is that it's kind of important to understand, like you said in your talk, who your audience is, because I think it's really, really important to note that with certain council officials, the emotional stuff and the storytelling will certainly resonate more. And then with officers, some officers will very much just be interested in having the technical bit, especially if they're an officer who doesn't have time. If they're, you know, a time poor, overworked officer, anything you can do to help them. We've kind of found in Lewisham and in various other boroughs, that's been really, really helpful, because you're in some ways having to enable them when they're time poor.
Great. It is very much John Usher, he's was part of Sustrans, has moved on from there. At one point he praised Bristol cycle campaign and Walk Right Bath at sometimes being the only transport planners in the west of England that were running. So and I think and that's also to do with the funding cycles. You know, if all you do is you win a couple of £1 million every 5 years to do something, then yeah, you're going to hire in a consultants, or you're going to get somebody on a contract for a year, and then they'll throw them away again.
I can also say the new head of strategic transport at the West of England Authority is the previous head of transport from Lewisham, and she would certainly help. Like, certainly appreciate that kind of help in that respect. So feel free to say hi to Louise McBride.
Yeah, absolutely. I will use that. Absolutely, will use that. Thank you.
And then we did have a question, somebody asking in the chat, and I don't think anybody did reply. If you could say just a little bit more about what felt is.
What it is, basically, we're looking at sort of collaborative tools for working together, and sometimes you need to, that sort of maps, and you want to be marking things and having conversations. And felt.com, I think it was, I don't know which campaign it was using. I think it was Cheltenham campaign. We're using it as a way of marking a map with stuff that they wanted to do, and they shared it. And I looked at this, so what is this? And it was intuitively, you could draw pictures on it, you could add images. You know, I could probably share you the livable neighborhoods map. Each of the dots, you can click on it and you can have images of what it actually is at that site. So people have gone out taking pictures, you know, taking screenshots from Google Maps. But it allows you that sort of conversation to kind of communicate and collaborate to create interesting spaces, particularly when you're trying to do, for example, the livable neighborhoods. Sort of work out which roads are already effectively aren't through roads. You know, one of you doing it on your own is a pain. Yeah, 5 of you doing it takes about half an hour. Yeah, and well, as long as you stick to the same rules, but it's just a way of contributing together on a map, and then kind of fixing your ideas. For us, I think we've got the LC whip is being rewritten in. By the end of by the end of this year, 2023. So Ian from Bristol, I'm looking at you, and I can see you looking down at the moment, but now you're looking up. Right, I'm going to be talking to you, and probably looking at possibly a Bristol campaign, working with everybody else to put together like a new LC whip map for the whole of the region, you know, and we can do that together through felt.com really, really easily. Yeah, that's the reason why.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Madeline, you've got a hand up. Have you got a question for or a comment for Adam?
Yes, I wanted to just quickly report my experience and come back with a question. So I've been an apprentice in a council for nearly a year, and I just wanted to say they're not all hostile to active travel. I am completely passionate about it and completely desperate to get involved, and have found myself pretty much stonewalled by local campaigns, local people who do use active travel paths, because I work for the council, and I find it incredibly isolating and lonely to feel like I have no social group that I can talk to, because yes, within the council don't get that much either. In the next few weeks, they will be recruiting for an officer under which I will work, and if you know anybody in South Wales who wants to work in active travel in the council, I would be the most diligent and engaged apprentice to work with them. But I just wanted to ask if you have kind of any better ways of networking than, so I found Twitter and this and a little bit LinkedIn so useful for actually keeping my mental health up, basically, that I'm doing something which is actually worthwhile. But in terms of connecting with local people and not coming across as the enemy, how would you do that from the other side?
Well, it sounds weird, but that sounds really kind of horrible, your local groups. Yeah, because you know, if we've had officers turn up, we invite them kind of, even if they want to talk, you know, or just turn up for a drink as part of it. You know, we've had I've had officers ask me to ask something. That does happen. Let's be honest. You know, officers have to stay very neutral. You know, and you know, stuff. And so for us, it's kind of like we're there to support them at all. Yeah, but it's understanding your role is horrible sometimes. You know, you're between a rock and a hard place. You know. And those keep moving. Yeah, the last thing you need is somebody standing on top and just poking you in, ha ha ha. Yeah. These people, the campaign groups really need to be engaging and not treating officers as politicians, because politicians come and go, officers stay there for a very long time. They're in this world. They're there to help you. You need to support them, and that's a really critical thing. This is that here is. A lot of time officers don't have a choice in what they do. That's what they've been told to do. That's what the budget allows them to do, you know, and it's not, and people get angry at them for some reason, but they don't have a legal right of response. You know, if the public has a go at an officer, the officer just has to sit there and take it. Yeah, because they're not allowed to respond in a human way sometimes. Yeah, so for me, I find that really strange. But we are there. I mean, do you have like an active travel forum in the council where you basically have officers and groups coming together once every 3 months? The one in Bath and North East Somerset is called it used to be called the Active Travel and Accessibility Forum. It is now the Journey to Net Zero Forum. Transport Forum, and basically they do a workshop every either 3 to 6 months, and everybody gets into work groups and starts working together. So they're building that sort of not camaraderie, but that sort of, you know, working together and having those conversations. And then afterwards, once in a while, you might even go for a drink afterwards and just sit there and talk to them. But that's a really important part of this, is that, you know, you're dealing with humans, and it is about audiences, but those audiences should work together, not against each other. I'm sorry to hear that from what you're telling me.
I just want to say thank you very much for everybody for all the suggestions in the chat. I really appreciate it. And yes, going to the pub afterwards would be the dream. So you just reminded me of something else. Anyway, yes, thank you everybody.
Well, I think I was just going to add to that. I think it depends on what your role is, but sometimes just because I've got to know loads of officers, and some of them, you know, very well, and councillors, and some of them will want to keep you at an arm's length. But it's really important if you're campaigning to kind of understand what it is that are the issues. You know, what are people's real difficulties, and I wonder whether sometimes the way to get to know people is when the council does engagement. And I guess I'm thinking like a long way back now, but whether there's things that whether you have public engagement officers also, you know, like who's doing these things where you get to meet people, and after a while you've met these people over and over again, and you build, as people do, relationships that way. But I'm really sorry to hear that you've found that hard. And the only other thing is that, you know, and if you're able to get sort of support to do that there's national conferences and things where you get to go and meet a whole range of officers and campaigners and councillors who are all interested in the same thing. That's really, really good to do.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you've just reminded me, something that Adam said that I just wanted to come back to was it was really funny. I did go to the London Walking and Cycling Conference last year, and that was the first time I've been in work for a bit, and I thought, oh my goodness, it's okay. There are people out there who think in a way that maybe I think, but it has been really noticeable to me how what is seen as political discussion is squashed, because you don't have this right to reply and you're not supposed to hold political opinions. But it's not it's not acknowledged that all opinions are political or everything is political, and that normative behaviour and normative opinions are still opinions. And that I can understand is very frustrating for people outside the council, and I would say it's definitely a problem. It's not an image thing. It's definitely a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Has anybody else got a question or a comment? Anybody else want to say anything about? We've had quite a lot of discussion on tools like WhatsApp and what have you, and I think Roxanne made a really nice point that about having to, you know, go to where people are. So sometimes we have to use tools that people might really not think are the best thing, but if that's what the people, you know, you want to engage with need to use, so if that's Facebook and if that's WhatsApp, whatever that is, I think that is a sort of a really, really good point to keep in mind. Does anybody else?
I just want to say on that, the choice of what you use is usually down to what is the most common tool across, you know, I know that's, for example, Telegram is being used by some groups who are opposed to what we're doing, but they organize themselves through Telegram. WhatsApp is used. I don't know if how much people have used WhatsApp. I've used it as a neighbors group before. And even that gets crazy. Once you get to about 10, 20 people, the fact it doesn't have reply to threads or threads inside it is one of the most horrible design decisions ever. Yeah, but it means it's basically a long chat. And the problem you can get with it is that you get people falling out because somebody posted something and then somebody just wrote something else, effectively ignoring them. So, but then other tools kind of grow on that. But that means, you know, you need to be downloading Discord. Oh, do you use? Oh, I don't use Discord. You know, WhatsApp is one of those things that families use as a way of communicating, so everybody has it. So it's common denominators and just accepting the fact. Although I do accept that if your homepage is Facebook, it's probably not ideal because people don't like to be logged in and tracked by Facebook. Yeah, which I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks again, Adam. That was really good, and I will probably have to go and look at some of those things again that I'd kind of like to find a little bit more about. I'm sure other people will. So we will be posting, as usual, the video for this and the slides on the website in sort of the next week or two. And I think we'll close then tonight. So thanks everybody for coming. Next week we have another election campaigning special. We've got speakers from Camp Cycle who are going to talk about Cambridge election campaigning. And we've also got somebody from Manchester Friends of the Earth who's going to talk about campaigning there. So that'll be a sort of slightly different angle. And again, and on that theme of campaigning, we've got loads of campaigners here tonight. If you think that there's something that you do that might be useful to share with other people, then get in touch and we'll look at booking in some future sessions. But on that note, thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you next week. Bye.